Conditional statements. Start there. So what are conditional statements? Conditional statements are formed from the combination of two sentences expressed if then very simply. My favorite example of this is, if I eat pizza, then I'll be happy. So you've probably seen them. I'm coming at this specifically from a logic games perspective. And of course, by the way, if you have any questions at any point, feel free to just unmute yourself and ask. I'm happy to address them at any point. Of course, you can also type them in the chat, but it's better if you unmute yourself just so we can have a little bit of a dialogue around everything. If you're not speaking, please do me a favor and put yourself on mute just so we don't get tons of background noise. So conditional statements, if then, very simple. You've seen them all before, especially common in grouping logic games. Typically you'll see them in the initial rules of the game. And in out games, when you have the same variables featured in multiple rules, that suggests that you'll probably be able to link them together in some way. So if you have A requires B and B requires C, you can naturally form a chain. A requires B requires C. Alternatively, if you had A requires B and you separately had C requires B, you could then form a different sort of connection saying that A and C each independently lead to B. Also framing it as A or C, then B. So it all depends on what's the necessary, what's the sufficient. We'll get into some examples together. So in that conditional, if I eat pizza, then I'll be happy. I eat pizza is the sufficient. It's the activator, known in formal logic as the antecedent, which you don't really need to know that term, but I'm putting it there for those who like the formal logic stuff. I'm happy is the necessary condition, also known as the consequent in formal logic. Diagramming it simply, P requires H. The sufficient requires the necessary. So it requires it, it activates it. Now, everybody loves indicator words. I've put a bunch of the most common ones for you here. Again, they're in the download. You don't need to write them all down now. Don't worry if you don't catch all of them. But basically, the sufficient condition indicators are all synonymous with sufficiency. Necessary condition indicators are all synonymous with necessity. Common source of confusion is the word only is typically a necessary condition indicator. You see here only, only if, only when. But the only is a sufficient condition indicator. And that's confusing because you see the word only there, but the only changes the meaning entirely. So take special note of that. I'm happy to walk through examples at some point if you like, but just note that for now as a red flag. Now, sufficient condition, again, left of the arrow is enough to cause or activate the necessary condition. So if you have X requires Y, X is the sufficient and Y is the necessary. Necessary is on the right side of the arrow. It often appears after a comma. So if A happens, comma, then B happens. You could put a comma there maybe if you want to. If you're lacking the words if then, the comma becomes even more important in a lot of cases. And again, it's required by the sufficient conditions. You could think that the sufficient is forcing something else to occur. The necessary is what must follow. And there can be chronological aspects to that, although there aren't always. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.